listening to One, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm rested, refreshed, feeling good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you?
Well, it's just nice not to feel like COVID anymore. That's nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I finally have started to feel more myself again.
I think in like a week I'll be back.
Yeah.
I'm very close. Like today I was doing things that I hadn't been able to do since like pre-COVID. So that was pretty exciting.
My brain has felt more highly functioning than it has in quite a while, honestly. So
yeah,
that's been
you
nice.
have been at
Peak operating speed.
This is pretty. Yeah.
Yeah, I organized like 6 rooms yesterday.
Yeah, you just kept telling me that there was more. And I was like, oh,
I was like, I did this and I did this.
Yeah.
I did this.
And you don't get, like, that's something I do.
Yeah.
I'm the one who bounces around and is like, today's the day closet. And I just,
yeah, it was me.
You don't.
It was me yesterday.
And yesterday you were like finding parts and pieces to things that we needed that we didn't know. It was just, you were on it.
Oh yeah, I found the sump pump part that we needed.
Yeah, that was
already
cool.
In the basement, just not installed.
Just not in the sump pump, which is a real shame.
So that's going to be a real fun project at some point.
No, today I was like walking around my classroom, reading aloud, like doing all of the things that were tiring to me 2 weeks ago. And it felt good.
Good.
So we're
I'm glad
back.
to hear it. I'm glad to hear it.
Mostly back.
That's good.
I think also what we're dealing with is that there's like a little bit more daylight.
There is.
And this week is like pretty nice.
My seasonal affective disorder is starting to calm down also.
Yeah. And we're like talking about the garden and like our friends are talking about tomatoes. Like it's just been kind of, it's kind of fun. There's daylight on my way to work, which hasn't happened for months. There's a little bit more daylight in the evening, but it's also been like in the 50s in Ohio, which has been nice.
Yeah.
I thought I was ready for more snow days. I think I'm okay.
You think you're ready for spring now?
If we're going to keep good weather and sun, then I'm fine. If it's going to start raining, just give me snow.
Yeah.
Like if the sun doesn't come out.
I prefer snow or a bright summer day. Yeah. Nothing in between.
Yeah, I'm exactly with you. Because the rain is what makes me so sad.
Okay, well, any other updates? We've got, let's see, you and I were traveling last week.
We were.
That was fun.
We were near the border.
With
to Canada.
The Canadian border?
Yes.
Yeah, we were.
We were up
sort
north.
of.
Were we not?
Well, we were in the southern part of Montana.
But that's more...
It is more northern. Actually, we might actually be closer to Canada here than we are
because
there,
of the lake.
Because of how big Montana is.
Well, I felt like we were close.
But you're right. We were close. We were far north. So we were
further
in Montana.
North, I suppose.
Yeah.
Fine.
There's a mess going on in Europe because Putin is invading Ukraine.
Yeah.
I feel just you ordered me something and it came today.
It did.
And you ordered it from a maker who's in Ukraine and the packaging said Kyiv on it when it got here, and I was just like, oh, because you ordered it before all that stuff.
I ordered it
happening.
like the first week of January.
Yeah.
And it's had a long trip.
Yeah.
I think is what I would
say. It made it though, and I just I really cherish it now because I'm just like who knows?
I know. And when I got the shipping, I was like, oh, that's fun, because I didn't I just picked that maker because they were creating what I wanted to order. Because the first week of January, this was not on my radar in any way that I've,
I don't think it was on the world's radar, really.
But I will include a couple of links in the show notes on ways to help and support Ukrainians. I just want to support them, and I think that they're beautiful, feisty people.
Yeah. It just makes you really, really sad to watch it happen.
Yeah.
It's really weird to be in a global geopolitical conflict where it just feels like everybody's kind of helpless in some ways. We were listening to some podcasts about it today, and these sanctions are definitely... They're not nothing for sure.
They're definitely something.
But it just feels very strange.
Yeah.
We're a very military driven society, so there are a lot of people who are just like, send the troops.
Well,
and
we
like,
also,
maybe we don't escalate. Maybe we don't make more war.
Yeah, but I don't want these people to not be.
That's the thing. I'm just supported. Like, okay, but what do I do?
Yeah. Well, last
week.
What
do I do?
Last week we were actually talking to someone who's from Poland, and she was kind of telling us just about, because she has family still, obviously, in Europe, and she was kind of talking about what Kyiv is and what the Ukraine is like. And it was really eye-opening, because one of the most interesting things that she said was kind of making the connection that I think a lot of people make, which is like, Kyiv isn't like some third world country. And she said something that was along the lines of like, these are people wearing North Face coats and carrying Samsonite luggage. Yeah. And it made me laugh, but I was like, that's exactly, you know what I mean? Like that's exactly what people who aren't aware of Ukrainians.
American exceptionalism tends to put in our minds that like everywhere that's not us must be so far behind us in terms of just sort of, you know, societal.
A lot of countries I've done that with, for sure. It's like the dangers of a single story, right? But it was so fascinating to listen to her, because she's being directly affected, and her family is affected, and just her kind of humanizing it was... It was good for me.
We looked up today because I had no idea how big Kyiv is, and I looked it up. It's almost 3 million people in that city.
That's a chunk.
For some reason, I thought it was a bit smaller. It's a big city.
What did it say? It was like it's like in the top 10.
I think you said 7th most populated city in Europe.
In Europe. I mean, it's in the top 10 for sure. You know, all these a large
technology companies there. I think I sent you an article about this. We think, to a best of our guess, about what's going on here. There's at least some element of kind of wealth acquisition and technology acquisition that's going on in Putin's sad, pathetic little brain here, because there are some really interesting tech sectors and founders and all kinds of interesting energy in Ukraine. But yeah, it's just been, I'm waiting for a voice of reason to help me understand what my responsibility is in this, because I know so little about, in European politics in general.
Yeah,
honestly.
Well, it's our privilege as well to not be.
I know what makes it across the ocean and the news waves, but I don't really have a very good sense of the day-to-day life in Europe. I just don't. So it's very strange to watch it. It feels like I'm not on sure footing when I'm hearing things and seeing things, and there's a lot of misinformation flying around too, because that's kind of Russia's MO, you know, buy all the fake Facebook accounts and cheer for Putin kind of stuff. So there's all kinds of stuff to keep in mind when you're thinking about and looking at this conflict, but just prayers to those people over there. That's just, I don't know. I just wish we felt more empowered to do something.
Yeah, I do too. So I will include the link to a group called Together Rising, which is created by Glennon Doyle Melton and her wife, Abby Wambach, and her sister, Glennon's sister. And they are always helping support the people who need it the most. And so I trust them with my money, and I trust the work that they do. And so I'll include a link to Together Rising if you are able to support, or would just like more information on ways to support.
Are they focusing on efforts in Ukraine right now?
Yeah, they are.
Okay. You ready to get into it for this week?
We kind of did our intros backwards, because we kind of went into how your brain has been operating. And now we have this topic all about the operations of the brain.
It's true.
So we should have, thought about it a little bit more when we were doing these notes, Chelsea.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm ready. Chelsea chose a topic this week. It's not a topic that I knew about until you, actually.
You hadn't heard of flow?
No. I'm going to just say no. Because I don't think I did.
This was very trendy in the business and tech world. Let's see, maybe like 2014. I don't know. The guy, so there's this guy named, I tried really hard to learn how to pronounce
I can't
this
wait.
name. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Is how the videos that I watched generally.
Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Poof.
That's
anyway,
cool. Great name.
Yeah. So he's a psychologist. Yep. He coined this term flow, and I think he wrote a book probably around 2013, 2014, something like that. But he's been working on this theory for quite a while now. The theory of flow and being in a flow state.
So what is it?
Yeah. So it's basically kind of losing yourself in your work is the layman's way of saying this, but there are more thought out things around it. And as you can imagine, you might want to you might want to think about how to encourage flow states when you're talking about educating people. So how do you help somebody kind of lose themselves and
the work that they're doing,
inhibitions and self-doubt, and lose track of time in the thing that they're doing because they're so interested in it and skilled in it, and it challenges them. That's kind of the premise.
So it has to do these things.
Yeah.
For it to be a flow state.
So Csikszentmihalyi says that flow is a state of full task engagement that is accompanied with low levels of self-referential thinking. So you're not, our anxiety brains would probably have trouble with this one sometimes, but basically you're so absorbed in something that your own worries and doubts and fears and things, that inner monologue that might otherwise interfere with your ability to get work done, it just kind of goes away.
Yeah.
It's a concept studied in positive psychology, which is a scientific study of what makes life most worth living.
Oh my, no pressure there.
I don't really think that I knew that there was a branch of psychology called, I think I've heard of positive psychology, but I wasn't sure that I knew what it was. It's pretty interesting as a scientific concept to study things that make life worth living. But yeah, positive psychology. So this guy Csikszentmihalyi has been working on this concept for quite a while. He says that everyone experiences flow from time to time and will recognize its characteristics. People typically feel strong, alert, in effortless control, unself-conscious, and at the peak of their abilities, both in a sense of time and emotional problems. Yeah.
So the peak is like, that's where... Okay. I didn't know that. I just assumed
you're in your element.
Yeah. I assume that you were in your element, but I don't think I would have used the word like operating at peak,
Yeah. Well, that's part of what makes this a little different from just, and we'll talk about it later. What makes this a little bit different from like hyperfocus.
Gotcha.
So,
which is maybe why
yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yep. Both a sense of time and emotional problems seem to disappear, and there's an exhilarating feeling of transcendence.
Do you find in your work that you're in flow state very often?
Yeah.
Really?
So part of the reason I was interested in this concept is because I haven't read his book, which I probably should at some point, but I read parts and pieces of it researching for this episode. And I've read other articles and, blog posts and all kinds of stuff about this concept.
Well, this is something that you've talked about for as long as I've known you.
Yeah.
So it's something that you've been aware of.
Well, tech people especially like to talk about this because people who code often talk about getting in the flow when they're coding. And I definitely do experience that. There are projects that I'll be working on where I just have no idea what time it is when I get out of my little work
you
session.
can definitely do that in ways that I can't.
I get such tunnel vision when I'm coding sometimes that I'll look up and it's like 4:30 in the morning and I'm like, oh now it's time to sleep.
Yeah. I don't get into that place.
Well, I also get this way.
But our work is so different. It's so hard to compare.
Yeah, but I don't, it's not really mostly about work for me. It's about something that you're skilled in. So
I have no skills.
Startup, I have no skills.
That took you a second. I thought you were just going to let me.
You have many skills.
I thought you were going to be like, yep, anyway.
You have many skills. Anyway.
That's funny.
No, I was going to say, I also experience this like when I'm playing video games sometimes. And also when I'm, not usually when I'm performing music, because I'm so stressed about performing in front of people. But when I'm composing music.
That's where you go.
I could just, for hours and hours.
Really?
And
I get so bored with stuff so much quicker than you do, I feel like.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what the difference is, but I also experience it when I'm working on craft stuff. If I'm making something or like learning a new, project. I like projects. Let's just say.
You do. You love a project like nobody needs another project in their life.
The thing that I found an interesting comment in some of the literature about this, that flow can often involve, quote, strenuous physical exertion or highly disciplined mental activity to enter continuous flow, end quote. And I don't know if you remember this, but I did a wood burning project for Christmas, and I concentrated on it so hard that I actually hurt my hand. I like caused some temporary nerve weirdness in my thumb on my right hand because I was just gripping that wood burning pen so hard for so many hours and I just didn't do anything else. I didn't like stop to stretch like I should have and stuff because I was just so focused on it. And then when I finally like put the thing down at the end of the day, I was like, I can't feel my thumb. So like that is the kind of thing where it's like, okay, a little dangerous. But what about you? Do you feel this phenomenon?
I do. I think for me, I don't remember if you said that part of flow is not being interrupted. Was that part of the rules like that you have?
Yeah. I mean, I have like a time set aside where you're not going to be bothered by outside stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely do get into those. I don't want to say it's a mood. It kind of is a mood, I suppose. But I feel like in my life, I have so little extended amounts of time that are uninterrupted.
Yeah.
That it's very hard for me to find that.
We'll talk more about this because he has this list of supposed conditions that help you to achieve a flow state. And I almost wonder if teaching as a profession is kind of set up to be in opposition to flow state.
That's what I was kind of thinking.
Because you're just like so many stimuli around you all the time. Yeah. Everybody demanding your attention.
And you only get I'm a high school teacher, so I get like 45 minutes with my kids. That's not long enough to get into some completely, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I would say that I definitely have been in a state like flow, I would have to say. Probably not in my day job. Now, it used to be like when I would have time after school where I could spend hours there or during the summer, you know, I can find myself in those things and I become very happy to sink into what I'm doing.
So you think that in your experience of it, kind of being isolated is an important factor for you?
For my brain. No, I'll have like music on, you know, but I don't, it's definitely not something that I can stay into while I'm dealing with teenagers. You know what I mean? So I think that's why it's hard for me to talk about it is because I don't feel like that much of my life provides me with an extended amount of time to enter that. Yeah. Whereas your work is so much different than mine.
My work is very solitary. I'm, you know, coding or working on a project or doing music I do by myself. Yeah. I don't know that isolation is something that Csikszentmihalyi talks about. Csikszentmihalyi? I'm not going to get it right. I'm going to try really hard. Csikszentmihalyi. Anyway, I don't know about isolation. Yeah. But it does seem that your attention has to be divided when there are people around you much more than when you're by yourself.
I value isolation in this type of thing though because I don't get much of it, whereas for you that kind of is your day job, you know. So I think for me I like that's probably part of what I value about it is that it's completely me by myself. I've definitely been in a state like this in like video games, I would say. And
there are interesting connections, and we've talked about some of it. Well, you and I, not on the pod, but you and I have talked about some of this before with video games. And again, there's kind of like an ADHD crossover here because there's a whole this kind of language around people who have ADHD being unable to focus, but usually what it is kind of a mismanagement of focus. Rather than
you're focusing on the wrong things.
And a lot of times people with ADHD like playing video games a lot because there are enough stimuli there to grab your attention wholly for a long time because there's like, you know, there are explosions and colors and fun dances
things happening and
blah 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 and
progress
it kind of gets your adrenaline pumping and like all of these kinds of things, and that's what makes certain kids able to, I don't know if able is the right word, but it enables them to basically hyper focus on playing video
or why they
games.
might be more likely to.
So again, it's not that you cannot focus, it's almost that you can't control the object of your focus. So again, we keep kind of talking about the crossovers here between ADHD, but flow is generally seen to be a good thing. And hyperfocus generally not. Yeah. But they do share characteristics, and he borrows language about focus, so it's hard to avoid. But anyway, okay, we have a couple of charts and graphs here, and we'll throw them in the show notes because they're interesting to me. But basically, these charts and graphs that I threw in here are trying to set out. Basically, you've got an X and Y axis, and on the axis, the Y axis is challenge, and that goes from low to high. And on the X-axis is skill, and it also goes from low to high. And basically what Csikszentmihalyi says is the flow channel is that kind of middle area. If you were to, draw just like a diagonal line going up and to the right in that chart, that's the flow channel. So basically, you're most likely to enter a state of flow when your skill matches the challenge. And the higher it is, the more interesting your state of flow is.
Or the more,
going to be.
okay, that makes sense.
The higher your skill and the more the challenge, and the closer those two levels are to each other. Because you don't want to have a ton of skill and no challenge. You're not going to have a flow state there. And you don't want to have a ton of challenge and no skill, because that would also be very irritating. Yeah. So, do you want to talk through the next list? This guy has conducted a whole bunch of studies. He's suggested that the phenomenology of enjoyment has 8 major components. And these are components that are essential for flow. So why don't you take us through them?
Yeah, so essentially they need to have or mention at least one of these. Or will sometimes include all, depending on what you're doing, obviously. But this list says that we will confront a task that we have a chance of completing.
A chance of completing.
That's where... Is anything
You're
ever
going
complete?
through it?
Yeah.
When you're a teacher, is your
Am I
task
ever done
complete?
with anything?
You can like get through an assignment, I would imagine. Get through like a unit or something.
It's just like indicators along the way. It's like if I get here, I know I can...
I think you're allowed to break things down into subcomponents because definitely when I'm coding, and I usually do work on big systems. I'm like a full stack engineer, so I work on the front end, I work on the back end, I work on APIs, I work on everything
all the
touching, all of the letters related to
everything that the light touches.
Everything the light touches, I code. So what that means is that the broader project doesn't usually feel like it's reached a state of completion because software is hardly ever complete if you're working on it, and updating it and adding new features. But subtasks will be complete, and you'll be like, okay, I've reached the end of this thing.
Moment.
You pass it off to your quality assurance team, and then you move on. So I was just going to keep using the coding example because that's the closest I have. But music too, like you reach the end of composing a piece of music. It sounds complete and you're happy with the product.
That's true.
That's another, my other main area of flow, I guess I would say.
Yeah. Okay, so the first one was we confront a task that we have a chance of completing, whatever that looks like. We must be able to concentrate on what we are doing. That's where the isolation comes in for me.
Yeah.
That's where I'm
being able to concentrate.
Yeah. The task will have clear goals, which I could go back and forth on. I think yes. Like I guess you know what you set out to do. So I suppose I understand that.
Yeah, but clear goals can just be like, okay, I want to finish the piece of music. Okay, I want to fix this bug.
Yeah,
okay,
that's true.
But again, for teaching, a little less rigid not that you don't have goals. You have many, many goals at all times as a teacher. But
I have no skills and no goals.
I think they're less... no skills, no goals. I think they're less tangible
I think that's why I'm having a hard time, because our jobs are so different in these ways. Okay, so the task provides immediate feedback, which we love.
For me, I refresh the page. If it's working, I love it. If it's not working, I immediately know that it's not.
Yeah. See, I don't.
You have to wait for your standardized test scores to come out every year, right?
But sometimes the kids just act right too. That helps. Okay, so another one is that you act with deep and effortless involvement, and that removes from awareness the worries and frustrations of everyday life, which
easier said than done.
Yeah, one exercises a sense of control over their actions.
That's another thing that I would bet would be very difficult for a teacher to do.
I'm like, these are hard for me.
This is like an assault on flow.
Yeah,
teaching is the anti-flow career. Okay.
Concern for the self disappears, but you also emerge, like your sense of self emerges stronger after that experience.
Oh, I've written a piece of music. I'm a more complete human being now.
Oh, okay. Gosh, I'm really not in this. Okay. And the sense or duration of time is altered.
Yeah.
So your awareness of how long you've been doing it.
Ooh, yeah.
See, this is really deep for you, and it is really not for me.
But again, I identify with a lot of these characteristics, but I couldn't tell you whether they're because of flow or because of hyperfocus half the time.
Sure. Okay.
So
how do we achieve flow? How do you achieve flow?
Okay.
What happens in your life?
Right. There's actually kind of a criticism because there's no like manual for getting yourself from point A to point B with flow. You can't talk yourself into being in a flow state.
Like, today's the day, flow. Let's go.
Which means that its usefulness as a psychological theory is perhaps diminishing. I don't know. I don't
because you can't set out to do it.
It's a very it's a descriptive thing. the description of flow seems to us to ring true if we experience flow, but how to get into it
is not the same.
All he does is basically say, okay, make sure you fit into the 8 points above. Like, have a clear set of goals and progress, add direction and structure.
Which I suppose
make sure the task you're doing has feedback, but you can't always help these things.
Yeah.
I think the one that is most interesting to me, I guess most accessible in terms of something you could work on tangibly, would be the developing a good balance between perceived challenges of the task and our perceived skills. So if I'm working on some new technology, I'm often not able to get into that flow state because I'm so frustrated by not knowing enough.
So you have that level of
the challenge is high and the skill is low.
Right. So, but for flow though, there is a level of comfort that you have to have with what you're doing.
So as you develop more skill,
that
things get
increases
easier,
your chances.
And it also reduces the challenge.
Sure.
But you could also take on more challenging projects after that, but you'd have to increase your skill accordingly. So he's basically just like, get better.
Yeah. Do you know who strikes me as someone who, this is probably me just really thinking about it, but Bo Burnham strikes me as somebody who probably through that entire special was in a deep state of flow.
I mean, possibly for months and months on end during the darkest days of the pandemic. Yeah.
That's someone that kind of comes to mind as someone who I could see being like this as a person who is in flow. But I was also thinking about like actors who take like the very extreme route into a
like
character.
Method acting. Yeah.
And I wonder if at some point that isn't also a flow activity. Does that make sense?
Well, they definitely lose their sense of self.
See what I mean? Like I think that, but that's also, it's probably also hyper focus. So I'm like going back and forth.
I don't know. That's an interesting question.
I'm just wondering if those would ever be described as that. Okay. How does flow then? Like, where does it get tied up with ADHD or OCD?
Yeah. So,
well, first of all, can I say, and I'm happy to say this, I am diagnosed with OCD and I've had anxiety for, I don't know, probably every day of my life. But as someone who is happily medicated to help control my OCD, right? Like I'm seeing this list and I'm like, this could be bad because that's what OCD can do to you. So how do we walk that line, I suppose?
Right. Yeah. So like I said earlier, ADHD is typically considered a maldistribution of attention.
I'm going to remand you of that just from time to time.
My attention is
Chelsea. This is a maldistribution of your attention.
This is a maldistribution. Yeah.
A maldistribution moment.
Yeah. I've often said that the processor in my brain, it's a single thread. There's only one thing that I can do at a time. You have teacher ears. You can listen to everything at once. You can listen to 5 separate audio sources and sort them all out somehow. I can
keep them all straight. I can be a part of each of them. And if Chelsea's like looking at the TV and I speak to her, we have to stop the show.
So people who have ADHD often oscillate between splintered and hyper-focused attention.
So you're saying?
Precisely. I'm hyper-focusing on the TV show because that's really the only way I can, and then if something else grabs my attention, I've basically trained myself now to just pause the show because I can't. It'll just go everywhere and I'll lose the thread.
See, but I'm scrolling, I'm playing a game.
Yeah, I don't know how you do that. You can just like read things. You can read news articles on Twitter and watch TikToks while there's a TV show happening. I'm just like,
and I can tell you what's happening.
I can't. I can't do it.
Hey, I'm telling you, teacher brain, man. It teaches you everything.
So there's this psychologist named Brandon Ashenoff. He's at the University of Birmingham. He studies hyperfocus. He's called this thing an interesting paradox. It's with ADHD, it's too much focus as opposed to a scattered attention span. You're focused so intently on something, no other information gets into your brain.
That's you.
That's me.
Okay.
I'm learning so much about myself.
This was a self-help
I don't need therapy. I have a podcast.
Hello, everyone.
That's a lie.
We're going to bill you therapy for listening.
Wow. Anyway.
My copay is $1 million.
So ADHD shows up in different ways depending on the person. Obviously, there's no one-size-fits-all for this kind of stuff. But the goal with treatment is to help people regulate their attention and harness the kind of attention necessary for the task at hand. So basically, hyperfocus can often be an element of the ADHD experience. It shares characteristics with flow just because of the way it deals with attention, and flow deals a lot with attention. But mainly, that's kind of just how we talk about these things. And one thing that's different here is, I think the main thing that's different actually is that flow is taking into account this relationship between skill and challenge. That's really not in the language of how you deal with ADHD. Like, we don't talk about people with ADHD in terms of, oh, well, what is their skill level?
Skill is
with the
focusing
task
so intently on TV that I can't hear you talk.
Right. So we're not talking to ADHD people about, well, what's your skill in watching TV?
Yeah. Well, they're so different.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
So anyway, flow, conceptually distinct, but does involve that conversation about focus. Couple points of...
basically, these are 3 circles that overlap a lot, but still have parts that are...
3 now?
Like OCD, ADHD, flow.
Yeah.
Like if we're to look at these things, there are certain characteristics that we would say that they do share.
Probably.
But it's maybe the level to which we're consumed, or...
I think it's about the control of
the brain space that... Okay.
Being able to control your focus. That's
because like OCD, I can't control what I become fixated on.
Right.
So flow is kind of a choice, is what you're saying.
Fixation is like the word, like the OCD kind of term that gets used a lot, and then like hyper focus is the ADHD term that gets used a lot.
But they're sort of doing
very similar things there.
They're doing similar things for people.
Anyway,
in a lot of cases, I should say.
We're definitely not in any way medically prepared to make statements about any of this, just for the record.
I'm only speaking about this from the perspective of I've had mild to severe anxiety since
we're speaking from our own experiences.
This is just me talking about what it's like to live with OCD.
Right. We're not trained medical professionals. No. Just wanted to make that clear.
If you want to pay me like a doctor, you can, but I'm not. Qualified.
But I'm not.
This is just me trying to make connections, because if you know Chelsea and I personally, you know how far off our brains are from each other. So it's really interesting to kind of find a weird connection here. Yeah. Because a lot of times when I'm like, why can't you just say yes or no to this quick question and not pause the TV, and instead we have to rewind, but it's not because you're not paying attention, it's because you're so...
One thread. Only one thread.
Nothing wrong with it. It's just, it's fascinating.
Okay, so a couple of points of criticism here. These are mostly just me being like, what about some of this stuff? But Csikszentmihalyi focuses on external causes of flow more than internal ones. And this has to do with that thing that I was talking about earlier. There's no easy way to talk yourself into a state of flow.
Okay.
Or force yourself into one.
Yeah.
So there's basically no self-directed approach to bring on a flow state. So the theory is more kind of descriptive than like testable and repeatable and all of these kinds of things. Like he's sort of analyzing a scenario, giving us language to talk about it. I don't think that's necessarily
a bad thing, though.
No, it just means that it's not necessarily the kind of...
The study isn't accurate.
Well,
because it's just
not inaccurate per se, but just it's a different kind of approach to psychology, I think. One that is not about giving you solutions to improve your life.
Because we're all just talking about something that we think is similar, but we've all lived different experiences of.
Yeah, I just think that if you can't follow steps to create a flow state, then it's sort of just like, well, how did we get here? Because normally science wants to have repeatable, experimentable. Yeah. That's not really a word, science. I don't think.
Can you tell what's happening when you get into it? Like, can you feel it coming?
I can't feel it coming. I usually know after the fact that I was in it.
Okay, that's what I mean.
I know when I'm in it and when I'm done being in it, but not when it's hack. Like, not, I'm going into flow now.
No. I didn't mean like that. But I wonder if as your brain is starting to work through something, if there are indicators in yourself to be like, oh, it's,
Well, I'll just be sitting at my desk and not moving and not getting up to stretch or eat or drink or anything. I'll just be... so engrossed, don't even notice my own body. Like I couldn't tell you if I were hungry while I was working in a flow
or like
state.
Cold or something.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I might wake up and I'm just like shivering, wake up, I say, from the flow state, but just like kind of emerge from whatever this is and be like shivering and hungry and whatever. But I'll feel great because I'm like, well, I wrote the song though. So that's what I was.
There have definitely been times where you've like emerged from the office and I hadn't seen you for like 6 hours.
Yeah.
And it's like a caveman just discovered light in the wheel.
Yeah.
I love that.
I was kind of doing that a little bit this afternoon because our websites went down, which I'm going to talk about in the what we learned section. But I was kind of a little bit in
a baby flow
state.
A baby flow.
Debugging. Yes. Maybe
cool.
like a stream instead of a raging river of flow. But
okay,
anyway, cool. The other bit of criticism here, again, I was reading some of this guy's work to research for this episode, and there was this quote quote from one of his books. He says, a person can make himself happy or miserable regardless of what is actually happening outside.
I was doing okay.
Just by changing the contents of consciousness. What the heck do you mean, just by changing the contents of consciousness?
Just by taking Lexapro.
Yeah, that was my thought. I'm just like, that's a pretty... And again, he's writing in a very specific context about a very specific phenomenon, so he's kind of using language a bit willy-nilly here, but this kind of language is...
Not very helpful.
Well, it's not very helpful for anybody who has any kind of mental illness.
That's what I mean. Like, it's not
even
making
the
me feel...
smallest touch of anything. You know that this isn't really how it works, because you can't just talk yourself out of a funk. That's not...
I have tried.
But have you tried changing the conditions of consciousness?
Yeah.
The content, sorry. Have you tried changing the contents of consciousness?
But you know what? That's what I'm going to do next.
That's a little ham-fisted to me.
In 2 weeks, my review of Changing the Contents of Consciousness.
Changing the contents of consciousness.
A special spin-off of 16 to 1.
Oh, no, thank you. I'm not interested. Okay, that's it. That's a wrap. That's the theory of flow. Sort of, kind of.
I would be curious to hear if anybody wants to share with us a flow state that you have found yourself in and what you were doing. I'm just curious what all we get into.
And a little bit of your background and your skill and challenge matrix there, because we like to know if this rings true for our listeners, or if it's just a weird thing.
It's interesting, though, to think as a teacher that my students could be entering something like this based on whatever they're working on, I suppose. Mm-hmm. It's kind of fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I think you and I keep relaying it back to our jobs, because that's what we do. But you were talking about like fun things, and I was talking about video games. So,
I mean, writing. I think writing is a task that lends itself to this pretty easily. So
but
your
I do
students
think
might experience that.
The current public education setup is probably not ideal to support flow.
Yeah.
If we value flow as like a way to achieve or create.
You do feel very good about yourself at the end of one of these kinds of experiences. For sure.
It's just, but it's fascinating because I think my class is not at all set up for a student to ever be that deeply.
Well, I think just the fact that they're 42 minutes long or something, 45 minutes long. That's about how long it takes me to drink my coffee and get really set up to even start concentrating in the morning.
Yeah, no, I'm just kind of thinking back, like, what's this look like in a classroom? Mm-hmm. And I imagine maybe it's achievable, but it's still an interesting thing to consider. Yeah. And because I'm sure everybody has been in it and maybe didn't know that's what it was. So pretty cool. I bet athletes can get into these as well.
Oh, yeah.
I remember reading last year about, I can't remember if it was like a pennant MLB game, and the pitcher was wearing a heart monitor, or like a heart rate. But they were talking about that I want to say that the situation was like 2 runners on, 2 outs, you're down 1, something like that, or you're up 1 and you're about to give up a hit. And when they looked at this pitcher's heart rate, it was lower before throwing that pitch than at any other point in the game. And that might have been like what we could call the most important pitch of the game. So you also wonder if it doesn't work in moments like that.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of cool to think about the ways that it can happen. Yeah. But that was an article I was thinking about.
Performance. I feel like performance, like I was talking about with music performance, I'm sure that there are people who are far less bundle of nerves kinds of people than I am about performance. So I think what's happening there is that my opportunity to reach flow state gets just kind of overridden by my anxiety in those moments. But I feel like I know people for whom performance, and again, it could be athletic or artistic, theater, whatever it is.
The calming part.
Performance could be that thing that prompts people to enter flow. And there have been times when I was in musical in high school, we got so practiced with the show that we were in that when a girl got strep 2 nights before we opened, we all just stepped in and covered her part.
Sure.
We were all so comfortable with it and not anxious about the lines. Like, we all knew everybody's lines. It was that well rehearsed. Yeah. So that show in particular, I did feel like I was able to I was much more able to be present in the experience. Yeah. And that's something that's pretty important
and
for
I
flow.
think even my former life as a softball coach, I can remember so many big games that I was stressing about. And the ladies were always like, I just want to play.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at them being like, why aren't you nervous or worked up or what are we doing? For them, they were like, I just want to play. Like that's what made them feel better.
Yeah.
So, cool. I like that one. I wasn't sure what we were getting into, but that was kind of interesting to hear.
What we're into. Want to move on to fill in the blank? Would you like to do last episode's question?
Yep. Here we go. Last episode was about Holocaust education. So the last episode, this was the question. Irina Sendler was a Polish Catholic humanitarian, social worker, and nurse who served in the Polish underground resistance during World War II in German-occupied Warsaw. Irina's story was discovered by a group of high school students in Kansas, with their research culminating in the now famous play called Life in a Jar. Question was, how many total children did Irina Sendler and her 10 compatriots save by creating fake documents for those children? It was 2,500.
Wow.
Children.
Is this the one who would like smuggle people out in carts and stuff?
Oh,
like,
she did all kinds of
underneath
things.
like medical supplies
all
and
kinds
things.
of things. Yeah. And like the life in a jar comes from the fact that she would take what she knew about the family of this child and she would write it all in a jar and bury it. Wow. And so that then they could go back and find family names and things like that.
Jeez.
So cool.
That's really cool.
So yeah, Irina Sendler, if you're not familiar, but she and her group saved 2,500 children.
Wow.
During World War II. Crazy. Wow. Okay, you want to do this episode?
Yeah, this episode's question. Again, this is fill in the blank. Send us an email, hello@1601.com. Send us an email with the correct response to this trivia question, or really any response to this trivia question.
Or just to say hello.
Just to say hi, and we will send you a 1601 sticker. And we've got a bunch of them. We want to
maybe a picture of our dog. Who knows?
Yeah, we owe some to one of our loyal listeners who wrote us last week. I got them sitting on the desk here, and they're ready to go. So just write in, again, hello@1601.com, and just say hi. Here's the question for this week. This episode releases on Thursday, March 3rd, 2022. So we're in March now. It feels like February flew by.
It did.
Which famous Roman god of war was March named after?
That's the question.
The famous. He's really the only one. God of war.
Yeah. Did I give too much away?
Who's the Roman god of war?
Yeah.
And you better give us the Latin version
of the
name instead of the Greek version.
Okay.
So that we know it's the Roman god.
Well.
Just saying.
You ruined my fill in the blank.
No.
No, it's fine.
Okay,
this is just right up Chelsea's alley.
Yeah. I'm a nerd about that.
That's
stuff.
okay.
Mythology stuff.
I was trying to find something of interest about March.
Which day is the Ides of March? Bonus question.
Okay. And if you
not everybody cares about Julius
right,
Caesar as much as you do. If
you get that one right, I'll send you a bottle of Caesar dressing.
A bottle of Caesar salad dressing. Not refrigerated, probably, because that's expensive. Okay.
If it's on the shelf, I'm good for a while.
I guess so.
I can get it to
Just don't open it before you send it. It'll be fine.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
What did you learn? What did you learn this past couple of weeks?
What did I learn? I've been fortunate the past few years to visit Montana a few times. And had not seen a moose. Of all the things we had seen in the Great Buffalo Experiment, the bison, bears, all kinds of things out west that I loved, no moose. So everyone, including Chelsea's like, oh, there's tons of moose. You'll see a moose. You're not looking hard enough. I had someone literally tell me that.
Yeah.
I was like, my guy, I've been looking.
She is. She is looking so hard.
When I say that I'm looking for a moose, I mean it. So we sit down at dinner and some bartender's like, hey, if you want to see a moose, there's one standing out here. And he was just standing outside the bar door.
Yep. Just staring in the window.
So I was trying way too hard because I was looking in like nature and he just walked out to dinner.
Looking in nature.
So I saw a moose.
He did. He just came up to the restaurant window and was eating the bushes.
Yeah. And they said that he just does that. He was pretty young too. Mm-hmm. So I finally saw a moose in the wild. Not like at the zoo. I've seen that. The other thing I learned about was not really all that much fun, but we were flying home and we came to Columbus via Denver. And our flight from Denver to Columbus was late and had technical issues. And it was because, and you can correct me if I've misunderstood this, it was because the fuel gauge wasn't automatically reading, like the fuel level wasn't automatically reading. So then they did this thing and had a paper and that wasn't good enough. So then they had to go and read it again.
They had to manually check the fuel level.
Right. So,
which took, for some reason, an hour and a half. I don't know.
It did. And so our very nice pilot just gets on, we've been sitting in this plane now for an hour, not doing anything. And he gets on the little speaker and he's like, well, sorry about us being late. We're going to try to find some shortcuts on your way to Columbus tonight. And we have enough gas to get there. And he basically just hung up. He was mic drop, goodbye.
Yep, we've got enough.
We've got enough. And I'm looking around and I'm like, nobody else is worried. Why didn't anyone else catch that we only have enough? So then Chelsea had to calm me down and explain to me how this works. So there are shortcuts that planes can take, which seems ridiculous.
Yeah, you think that a plane flies in a straight line from point A to point B, and they don't. They follow a series of waypoints and handoffs across the country, basically.
So that's what he was thinking is like, whatever.
A shortcut means that you're decreasing the distance by finding a different waypoint instead of the one you were going to have.
In his mind, it was very normal to be like, we have just enough gas or fuel, and also we have a shortcut. And in my head, I'm like, it's the sky. There are no shortcuts. It's all. What is the shortcut between Denver and Columbus? So I learned about that. I don't know if I needed to. See, that's my anxiety brain kicking in. That's when I was like, are we sure we have enough fuel? When you say we have enough, is that enough for like an extra lap or like, those are the things.
Yeah, good questions.
But we did get here.
We did.
Only like an hour late, so
yeah, it wasn't that bad.
And we did find a shortcut also, for anyone curious. I'm going to guess it was somewhere over Kansas.
Yeah.
Because I hate it the most.
It's the worst. Sorry, Kansas.
If you're a listener in Kansas, I'll send you $5 if you email me. I owe it to you.
You better not make that promise.
I've been shitting on Kansas.
That's not a legally binding promise.
I've been on Kansas for 2 years in this podcast. It's the least I can do. Truly. Every time we drive or talk about it, we're like, Kansas.
Sorry, Kansas.
Anyways, what'd you learn?
I learned how to get past some hurdles with some 3D printing projects that I've been working on. Namely that the prints would always fail no matter what I did. I think I finally learned, fingers crossed, what was happening. And I think it's that I didn't have enough base layers. So I have a resin printer, and it basically cures plastic. It cures plastic. It cures plastic by means it cures plastic in tiny little layers with UV light. So if you don't have enough tiny little layers at the very bottom where you're supposed to attach to the print plate deck, whatever it is. If you don't have enough layers on the bottom to attach it to the thing that goes up and down and moves it on and off the UV light, it'll just fall off, and then it will not work. You'll just print like 4 layers, and it'll be stuck to the wrong side of your printer. So I increased the number of layers. You also have to increase the exposure time on those base layers. You need to make them harder. I don't know how else to say it, but you cure them for longer. So I was reading about all of that. I found some instructions. They were like, try this. And I tried it, and it still failed. And then I took a wild guess as to what was going on, and it turned out it was right. So that's kind of what I learned. And then I successfully printed it.
And he looks so good.
Model. Yeah. It's the orb ponderer. I printed a 3D model of the orb ponderer, that meme from like 4 months ago. I don't know. Yeah, that. And then I also learned how to hack our website back together. We have a kind of cruddy web host on our 16:1 website. And actually my personal website was also borked. But I figured out it was just a bunch of malware somehow, probably through an old WordPress plugin or something, and it just wreaked havoc. There were about 75 files all over my directories that I had to delete because they were injecting malicious scripts. But I figured out how to do it, and now our website's working again, at least for now, knock wood.
All of the work.
You just scared the cat. I scared the cat.
Thinks somebody's
but
at the door.
I didn't want to not knock wood there.
Respect it.
Anything, final thoughts? Wrapping up?
This is a fun one. I'll include links to different just groups sort of organizing for Ukrainians and the support of
humanitarian efforts and such.
And I'll probably also include a link to the Holocaust Memorial in Kyiv that was bombed as part of one of the more recent attacks. And just kind of help, you know what I mean? Get as many clicks as we can to those types of resources. I think that's, at the moment, it seems to be the best that we can do until we really know more. Yeah.
For those of you who do know more on this situation, write in. Because I just feel
we would love to have that conversation.
I'm just so at a loss. I don't know enough. I want to know more. I want to be helpful. I want to inform others about how to be helpful, but I don't want to do the wrong thing.
No, and we don't want to speak in a way that isn't somehow helpful or supportive, but we're also learning what that sounds like as well. And as we've kind of joked about, Chelsea and I recently, we're in our early 30s, and we've joked about all of these things that never happened, but have somehow only happened in the past 30 years. as we talked about September 11th and all of these other events, it's just been so fascinating to be learning, how to do these things properly and what that looks like and how you can help and assist people. And
especially in the age of social media, it's very difficult to navigate some of this stuff.
So we want to make sure that we're sharing
responsibly,
trustworthy. Yeah, exactly. So, and we want to make sure that we're doing it right. So we'll work on it. Always working on it. Always learning.
Thank you for joining us.
We'll talk to you soon.
See you next time.
Hello, Kansas. Just a special hello and a goodbye to you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks for supporting 16 to 1.
We're trying to grow our audience, so please check us out at 16to1.com, all spelled out, and tell your friends about the show.
On our website, you can find links to follow us on social media, an archive of all our old episodes, and a contact form where you can get in touch.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show. Am I wrong?